Some nights the lights came on, but the musician didn't, not really. They stood on that stage in front of thousands of people and they were completely gone. The industry buried these stories. Managers looked the other way. Fans never got the truth. Here's what most people get wrong. These weren't just wild rock and roll moments. Some of these nights destroyed everything. 10 musicians, too wasted to perform. The truth is darker than the legend. Number 10, David Lee Roth Van Halen. And nothing gets me down. Picture this, it's 1983. You've got over 300,000 people standing in the California desert heat. The sun is brutal. The dust is everywhere, and everybody is waiting for the biggest hard rock band on the planet to take the stage. Van Halen at this point is untouchable. They are the band. Diamond Dave is the showman. The guy who does the splits, kicks the mic stand, laughs at everything. He makes it look effortless. But on this particular day, he could barely stand up straight. How can't you see what I mean? Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak personally funded the U.S. festival. He paid Van Halen $1.5 million to headline Heavy Metal Day. That was a record-breaking fee at the time. Nobody had been paid that much to play a single show. The band had been off the road for 3 months going into that festival. 3 months of no discipline, no structure, just doing whatever they wanted. And David Lee Roth arrived in no shape to perform. Go ahead, Joe. Wozniak later wrote in his memoir, and his exact words were that Roth was, quote, practically falling down on stage. Now think about that. A man just paid you $1.5 million. He's standing in the crowd watching, and you can barely keep your footing. What made it worse is that Roth reportedly got into a massive argument with the rest of the band over money, specifically over who was getting what cut from that record payout. The tension was real. The bad blood was already building. Within 2 years, David Lee Roth was gone from Van Halen. Some people say this festival was one of the early warning signs. The cracks were already showing. You just couldn't hear them over the guitars. Now, this story got buried because Van Halen was still huge. The machine kept moving. Nobody in the press wanted to bite the hand that fed them access. And Roth himself was so charismatic that people just wrote it off as showmanship. The people who were there, crew members, photographers, journalists at the side of the stage, they all tell the same story. That wasn't a show. That was a man running on empty. Number 9 is the story of 2 men so far gone that their own band couldn't look away anymore, and the whole thing nearly ended before it even really began. Number 9, Steven Tyler, Joe Perry, Aerosmith, the Toxic Twins. You have to understand what Aerosmith was in the mid-70s. They were one of the biggest bands in America. Sold out arenas, screaming crowds, one hit after another. And behind all of it, 2 men who were quietly, steadily destroying themselves. Steven Tyler and Joe Perry earned that nickname together, the Toxic Twins. It wasn't a joke, it was a warning label. By 1978 and 1979, both Tyler and Perry were so deep into heroin and cocaine that shows were becoming genuinely dangerous. Not dangerous in a rock and roll way, dangerous in a nobody knows if he'll make it through the song way. At the 1979 World Series of Rock in Cleveland, one of the biggest concert events of that summer, Steven Tyler collapsed on stage, right there in front of tens of thousands of fans. Yeah, his body just gave out. Joe Perry left the band the following year, not walked away. Left mid-tour after a backstage incident with Tyler's wife. The band that had worked for nearly a decade to get to the top just fractured. The thing that hits hardest when you study this era? The music they were making was still extraordinary. Rocks, Toys in the Attic, Draw the Line, Some of the best hard rock records of that entire decade came out of two men who could barely function off stage. That's the cruelest part of addiction. The talent doesn't disappear right away. It just costs more and more to access. Aerosmith fell completely apart in the early 80s. Tyler was doing solo work. Perry had his own project. Brad Whitford left, too. The band that was supposed to be America's Rolling Stones was playing half-empty clubs. They came back in 1987 sober, and they were bigger than ever. But there's a full decade of pain sitting between those two chapters, a decade that most people skip over. Stay with me because number 8 is closer to your own lifetime. And it's one of the most heartbreaking things that happened on a rock stage in the 2000s. If you're enjoying this so far, smash that like button right now. It costs you nothing. And it helps us keep digging into these real stories that most channels won't touch.
Hey, Rocklore community. Before we continue, let's have a real talk for a second, bro. You know, this isn't just a channel to us. And I hope it's not just a place you come to watch a video and then forget about it. This is a community. It's a place where we get to dig up the secrets of rock and roll, share our favorite riffs, and celebrate the artists who maybe didn't get the love they deserved. Right now, only about 1% of our viewers are subscribed. We can change that together and grow this community. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button with the notification bell on. When you do, you're not just helping a channel grow, you're becoming a member of the Rocklore family. You're signaling to us and to YouTube that these stories matter, that this music is worth preserving, and that this community is a place you want to be. Subscribing is your way of making sure you're always in the loop. It means you'll be the first to know when we unearth a forgotten legend, drop a new countdown, or dive into a piece of rock history you've never heard before. So if you're a true fan of the lore, if you get that same feeling of discovery that I do, then come join us. It takes 1 second to be a part of something bigger.
Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history, and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful. Number 8, Scott Weiland, Stone Temple Pilots, the slow motion collapse. Scott Weiland had one of the greatest voices in 90s rock. If you grew up in that era, you know exactly what I mean. That low, dark, theatrical delivery on Creep, on Plush, on Vaseline, it was like nothing else out there. But by the time the 2000s arrived, going to a Stone Temple Pilots show had become something that broke your heart a little bit. The reviews from multiple STP shows in that period all tell the same story. Weiland was clearly impaired. He slurred his words. He forgot entire sections of lyrics. He wandered across the stage with this disconnected look, like he was watching the show from somewhere else inside his own mind. Fans who had followed STP for 20 years were paying full ticket prices and leaving early. That's how bad it got. The band fired him in 2013. They put out a public statement. They said they loved him. They said they'd tried everything. They said they could no longer put fans in the position of not knowing what they were going to get. What makes Weiland's story different from the others on this list is that he wasn't new to this. He had battled addiction publicly for years. He'd been to rehab multiple times. There were moments, real moments, where it looked like he'd found his way back, and then the floor would fall out again. His battles were so public that some fans started treating it like background noise, like it was just part of the Scott Weiland story. And that normalization that's part of what makes this so tragic. Scott Weiland died on December 3rd, 2015. He was found on his tour bus. He was 48 years old. His ex-wife wrote a powerful open letter after his death. She didn't want people to romanticize it. She wanted people to understand what addiction actually looks like up close, what it does to children, what it does to families. She said his death should not be mourned as a rock and roll tragedy, it should be understood as a disease. Number 7 is one of the most famous incidents in rock history, and yet somehow the real story is still wilder than what most people know. Number 7, Ozzy Osbourne, Des Moines, Iowa. Ozzy Osbourne had just been fired from Black Sabbath for being too far gone, too drunk, too unreliable. The band that invented heavy metal looked at him and said, "You're too much even for us." So what did Ozzy do? He started a solo career. He put together the Blizzard of Oz with a brilliant young guitarist named Randy Rhoads. He recorded 2 incredible albums, and he went on tour, but make no mistake, the substance abuse had not stopped, it had accelerated. At the Veterans Memorial Auditorium in Des Moines that January night, a fan threw something onto the stage, a bat. Whether it was already dead when it landed is still debated to this day, but Ozzy, in his own words, thought it was a rubber toy. He picked it up, he bit its head off. It was not a rubber toy. He was rushed to a local hospital for a series of rabies injections, and he later wrote in his autobiography, "I Am Ozzy," that he had zero memory of doing it. The substances had him so far under that his brain simply didn't record the moment. 3 years later, Ozzy went out on tour with Mötley Crüe, and when journalists asked him how those shows went, his answer was honest. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "I don't remember any of those shows, not some of them, not most of them, all of them. An entire tour gone because of what he was putting into his body every single day." Ozzy somehow survived all of it. The rabies shots, the Alamo incident, the decade of blackouts. He got sober, he rebuilt, and he became one of the most beloved figures in all of rock history. But the story of that Des Moines show is more than just a wild anecdote. It's a window into just how far gone a human being can get and still somehow walk back from the edge. Number 6 is different from everything else on this list because this one didn't end in a comeback. This one was a goodbye, and almost nobody realized it in the moment. Number 6, Layne Staley, Alice in Chains. Alice in Chains had gone quiet. 3 years without a tour, 3 years of silence from a band that had been one of the defining voices of the early 90s. Then came MTV Unplugged, and Layne Staley walked out, and you could see it, plain as day. The man standing there was not the same man who had recorded Dirt. Just 4 years earlier, he was frail. He was gaunt. His face told the whole story. The Unplugged session in April 1996 was followed by a live show at the Paramount Theater in Seattle. And from the moment Staley took the stage, people in that room understood they were watching something fragile. His voice was still there. That's the thing about Layne Staley. Even when his body was failing him, the voice refused to go quietly. But his movement was limited, his energy was barely held together. The heroin addiction had been eating at him for years, and by this point there wasn't much left to eat. This was the last time Alice in Chains ever performed live. Nobody announced it. There was no farewell. The band simply never got back on stage together after that night. Jerry Cantrell has spoken about this era with honesty. He said the band was walking a tightrope just getting Layne to those shows, that they knew the situation was serious, that everyone around him was trying to hold something together that was already coming apart at the seams. The thing that stays with you is this, that Paramount show was extraordinary. Despite everything, despite how sick he was, Layne Staley stood up there and delivered, which makes it all the harder to watch knowing what came after. Layne Staley died on April 5th, 2002. He had been alone in his apartment for about 2 weeks before anyone found him. He was 34 years old. His story isn't a rock and roll cliche, it's a human tragedy. And that last show, that last performance deserves to be remembered for what it actually was. A man who was losing the fight, but who still showed up. Coming up, number 5 is one of the strangest, saddest things ever witnessed on a rock stage. And the man at the center of it never even remembered it happened. Number 5, Syd Barrett, Pink Floyd.
From the supermarket store.
This one is not like the others on this list. The others were about men who got wasted and stumbled through a show. Syd Barrett's story is about a man who simply stopped being there, still standing, still breathing, guitar around his neck but gone. Completely and totally gone. Syd Barrett was the founder of Pink Floyd, the songwriter, the creative engine, the one who made it all happen. By late 1967, heavy LSD use had started to unravel his mind in a way that was impossible to ignore.
By the eye, then I stop and have to think what a funny thing to do, 'cause I'm feeling very big.
Bandmate Nick Mason described arriving in the US for a tour and realizing something was deeply wrong. Syd didn't know where he was, didn't recognize people he'd known for years. At the Fillmore West in San Francisco, he stood on stage during Interstellar Overdrive and slowly detuned his guitar, string by string. You know, while the band played around him, he wasn't improvising, he wasn't making a statement, he was just somewhere else entirely. On a show in London, Roger Waters and manager Peter Jenner had to physically carry him to the stage. They put the guitar around his neck, the band started playing, and Syd stood there with his arms hanging at his sides for the entire set. He didn't sing a word, he didn't play a note, he just stood there. David Gilmour, Syd's old school friend, was brought in to cover for him on stage. There was a period where Pink Floyd was literally a 5-piece band, with Gilmour playing Syd's parts while Syd stood a few feet away staring at nothing.
Like to know I'm a lorry driver.
Can you imagine what that felt like? Standing next to your bandmate, your friend, trying to play his songs while he looks through you like you're made of glass. In January 1968, the band were driving to a show in Southampton. Someone asked, "Should we pick Syd up?" And someone else said, "Let's not bother." And that was it. No confrontation, no formal sacking. They just drove past his street. Syd Barrett spent the rest of his life largely in isolation. He did 2 solo albums, both devastating listens. He eventually returned to Cambridge and lived quietly with family until he died in 2006. Pink Floyd went on to become one of the biggest bands in history, but they carried the ghost of their founding genius with them for the rest of their career. The song "Shine On You Crazy Diamond" was written about him. The wall has echoes of him. He was always there. Hold on, because we're coming up on number 4, and this is the one I told you about at the start. The night a rock star became the first musician ever arrested live on stage. And the real story is messier and more fascinating than any textbook version. Number 4, Jim Morrison, The Doors.
Riders on the storms.
Connecticut, December 9th, 1967. This is the one I mentioned earlier. The night that changed everything. The night a rock star became the first musician ever arrested live on stage in rock and roll history. Jim Morrison in late 1967 was at the peak of his powers. The Doors had broken through. Light My Fire was everywhere. Morrison was being called a poet, a shaman, a voice of a generation. He was also drinking heavily, constantly, before shows, during shows, after shows. The alcohol was a daily companion.
Take a long holiday.
By this point. And on this particular night, it all came together in one of the most chaotic and iconic moments in rock history. Before the show even started, Morrison was backstage. He'd met a young female fan, and the two of them ended up in a backstage shower stall together. A police officer who was there providing security for the band came across them and told them to leave the area. The officer didn't recognize Morrison. He just saw a long-haired guy who wasn't supposed to be back there.
Girl, you gotta love your man.
What happened next depends on who you ask. Ray Manzarek, the Doors' keyboardist, said Morrison told the officer, "Eat it." The officer warned him one more time, and Morrison reportedly said, "Last chance to eat it." The cop maced him point blank in the face. Then, after learning who he just maced, apologized. Apparently, if you're famous, you don't get maced. Here's where it gets important, because this wasn't just a funny backstage story. Morrison went on stage that night furious, blind with anger, and already drunk.
Into this house we're born.
Midway through Backdoor Man, he started talking to the crowd about what had just happened to him. He called out the police officers at the back of the venue. He called the cop who'd maced him, and I'm using his words here, a little blue man in a little blue hat. There are different versions of how the arrest played out. Some accounts say a police captain simply walked to the front and told the band to stop. Others say there was a tense standoff between Morrison and law enforcement that lasted several minutes before officers stepped onto the stage. What is not disputed is this: Jim Morrison became the first rock performer ever taken into custody during a live performance. Police charged him with inciting a riot, indecency, and public obscenity. He was dragged off stage. 13 more people were arrested as the crowd spilled into the streets. In context, you have to understand the culture of that moment. 1967, America is splitting in two. In young people on one side, the establishment on the other. A police officer physically removing a rock star from his own stage in front of his own audience was not just a news story, it was a symbol. Some people say Morrison deliberately provoked the police that night. Others say a drunk, angry man just couldn't hold it together after being humiliated. In interviews over the years, surviving band members have said there are elements of both truths at work. What the incident did to Morrison's legacy is complicated. On one hand, it burnished his rebel image. The story traveled fast. It made him look fearless. On the other hand, it was the beginning of a pattern. Miami, 1969. The alleged exposure incident, cities banning the band, venues refusing to book them. Their touring career effectively ended within 2 years. The song Peace Frog, recorded later, has a lyric about blood in the streets of the town of New Haven.
Take a long holiday.
Morrison wrote himself into rock history that night, whether he meant to or not. That's why this isn't just a wild night out. This is the moment rock music looked law enforcement in the eye and didn't blink first. And the industry, the labels, the managers, the radio stations, they quietly noted every second of it. Number 3, Nikki Sixx. Mötley Crüe, the Shout at the Devil years. Mötley Crüe in the early 80s were performing in a state of near constant chemical obliteration. They have been open about this. There is no mystery here. The Shout at the Devil tour, 1983 and 1984, was, by the band's own account, a series of shows that they barely remember. Tommy Lee has described getting to a city and genuinely not knowing how they got there. Nikki Sixx has said there are entire years of his life that are blank. Not fuzzy, blank. These men were playing sold-out arenas, performing 2-hour rock shows, putting on enormous productions, and doing it all completely wrecked. The Crüe's excess was so legendary that when they went on tour with Ozzy Osbourne in 1985, the stories coming out of that tour were almost mythological. Yet these were two of the most self-destructive acts in rock history on the road together. Ozzy himself said he has no memory of those shows. moment that defines this chapter, the moment that cuts right through all the rock and roll mythology and lands somewhere painfully real, is December 23rd, 1987. London. Nikki Sixx shot heroin, and his heart stopped. He was clinically dead for approximately 2 minutes. The paramedics hit him with 2 shots of adrenaline to bring him back. Here is what gets you. After being revived, after coming back from clinical death, Nikki Sixx went back to his hotel room and used again. That is not a rock and roll story. That is what addiction actually does to a human being. It removes the logic, it removes the survival instinct, it removes everything except the need. Well, he has spoken about this moment with extraordinary honesty in the years since. He says he genuinely believed he was invincible. That night in London was the first time that belief cracked.
Shout! 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 Ooh, the devil!
He took that experience and wrote a song about it. That song was Kickstart My Heart. It became one of the defining rock anthems of 1989. It went to #1. It's been in films, on TV, at sporting events. You've heard it 1,000 times, and every single time it plays, it's a man singing about the night he came back from the dead. The overdose shook the entire band. Within months, all 4 members of Mötley Crüe entered rehab. Got sober. They came back with Dr. Feelgood in 1989, their biggest album, their tightest performances, their most focused work. The contrast between what they were and what they became is one of the most remarkable stories in rock history, but it required one of them nearly dying first. #2 is the moment an entire movement collapsed in real time in front of 5,000 people, and the man at the center of it couldn't even plug his bass in. #2, Sid Vicious, the Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols' first American tour was a catastrophe from day one, and it was designed to be. Manager Malcolm McLaren deliberately avoided New York and Los Angeles, the cities, with actual punk scenes, and instead booked the band into redneck bars across the Deep South. Atlanta, Memphis, San Antonio, Baton Rouge, Dallas, Tulsa. These were venues full of people who had zero interest in punk rock and every interest in picking a fight. And McLaren made sure journalists were at every show to document the inevitable chaos. By the time the tour reached San Francisco for its final date, the band was barely functioning as a unit. Johnny Rotten wasn't speaking to McLaren. Rotten wasn't really speaking to anyone. Guitarist Steve Jones was dealing with the flu and equipment that kept falling apart on stage. And Sid Vicious, by this point deep in a heroin addiction that had taken hold hard and fast, was in another world entirely. There are multiple accounts of Sid's bass being turned down or completely unplugged at shows during that tour. At the Winterland, witnesses confirm he didn't bother to plug his instrument in at all. He stumbled through the set. He could barely stand. The show drew between 5,000 and 6,000 people. It was the biggest crowd the Pistols had played to on that entire tour, and it was the last time the original Sex Pistols ever took a stage together. At the end of the show, Johnny Rotten delivered what became one of the most famous mic drop moments in rock history. He looked out at the crowd, held the microphone, and asked, "Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?" Then, good night, that was it. The Sex Pistols were over. Not with a press release, not with a management announcement, with one question to 6,000 people in a former hippie ballroom in San Francisco, while the bass player stood behind him, unplugged and barely upright. Sid Vicious died on February 2nd, 1979. He was 21 years old. He'd been arrested in October 1978 for the death of his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen, at the Chelsea Hotel in New York. He overdosed on heroin the night he was released on bail. The story of Sid Vicious is often told as pure mythology. The The most punk rock life possible, burning brightest and shortest. But the reality is a young man who got swept into something he couldn't control and who had nobody around him capable of pulling him back. Number 1 is unlike anything else on this list, because this one happened in front of 14,000 people, and the solution was to ask the crowd if anyone could play drums. What happened next has never been repeated in rock history.
Hey, Rocklore community. Before we continue, let's have a real talk for a second, bro. You know, this isn't just a channel to us. And I hope it's not just a place you come to watch a video and then forget about it. This is a community. It's a place where we get to dig up the secrets of rock and roll, share our favorite riffs, and celebrate the artists who maybe didn't get the love they deserved. Right now, only about 1% of our viewers are subscribed. We can change that together and grow this community. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button with the notification bell on. When you do, you're not just helping a channel grow, you're becoming a member of the Rocklore family. You're signaling to us and to YouTube that these stories matter, that this music is worth preserving, and that this community is a place you want to be. Subscribing is your way of making sure you're always in the loop. It means you'll be the first to know when we unearth a forgotten legend, drop a new countdown, or dive into a piece of rock history you've never heard before. So if you're a true fan of the lore, if you get that same feeling of discovery that I do, then come join us. It takes 1 second to be a part of something bigger.
Every story you see here takes hours of digging, piecing together history, and bringing forgotten moments back to life. If you'd like to support that work, you can become a channel member. It's just the cost of a cup of coffee, but it helps us keep these stories alive, and for that, we're grateful. Number 1, Keith Moon, The Who, Cow Palace, Daly City, California. The Who are opening their Quadrophenia US tour. This is a massive deal. Quadrophenia has just come out, one of the most ambitious double albums in rock history. The band is at the peak of their powers artistically, and Keith Moon, before the show even starts, takes what eyewitnesses describe as a combination of horse tranquilizers and brandy. Some accounts say PCP. Some say animal sedatives of some kind. Multiple versions of the story exist, but all of them agree on one thing. Whatever he took, it was an enormous amount. About 70 minutes into the show, something starts going wrong. The drumming, usually this explosive, almost violent force of nature, begins to slow, to drift, to lose its shape. During Won't Get Fooled Again, Keith Moon simply stops. He slumps forward over his kit. His roadies come out and physically carry him off stage while the rest of the band tries to hold the song together. Crüe take him backstage. They try to revive him. Accounts differ on whether it was a cold shower or a cortisone injection or both. Somehow, Moon comes back out. He sits down behind the drums. He starts playing Magic Bus, and then he collapses again. They carry him off a second time. Pete Townshend walks to the microphone. 14,000 people in front of him, and he says, "Can anybody play the drums? I mean, somebody good." Let that sit for a second. You are at a Who concert in 1973, and the guitarist is asking the crowd if any of you know how to play drums. At the left side of the stage, a 19-year-old kid named Scott Halpin is standing with his friend. He had bought his tickets from a stranger outside the venue. He'd moved to California from Iowa not long before. He hadn't played drums in a year. His friend starts pushing him toward the security staff. "He can play," his friend shouts. Concert promoter Bill Graham looks at the kid and says, "Can you do it?" Scott Halpin says yes. They hand him a shot of brandy for his nerves. Pete Townshend shakes his hand. Roger Daltrey introduces him to the crowd simply as Scott. And Scott Halpin, a 19-year-old Who fan who came to watch the show, plays 3 songs with one of the greatest rock bands in the world. Smokestack Lightning Spoonful, and a 9-minute version of Naked Eye. Roger Daltrey was furious with Moon for days after he felt let down. He felt that Moon had disrespected the audience. Townshend, who knew Moon better, I'd said he'd half expected something like this might happen one day. Scott Halpin was later awarded Rolling Stone's Pickup Player of the Year award. Townshend wrote a tribute about him years later. He called him one of the great and good ones. Halpin died in 2008 of a brain tumor. Keith Moon died 5 years after this show, September 7th, 1978. He was 32 years old. He accidentally overdosed on Heminevrin, a drug prescribed to help him manage alcohol withdrawal. He took 32 tablets. He was found dead in the same London flat where Mama Cass Elliot had died 4 years earlier. He was 32. He looked 52. The body remembers everything. The Cow Palace show is remembered as one of the strangest nights in rock history, and it is, but it's also something else. It's a portrait of a man whose brilliance and self-destruction were running at exactly the same speed for his entire career. Keith Moon was the greatest rock drummer who ever lived, and he burned through his own life the same way he played faster and harder and more recklessly than any human being should.